was supposed to be just another flight. That's what I told myself as I zipped up my flight suit in the pre-dawn haze. The world outside Clark Air Base still half asleep. The air thick with the scent of jet fuel and distant rain. 7 of us, all men who'd flown together before. All used to the long, lonely stretches of the Pacific. We were the kind of crew who could finish each other's sentences, who knew the sound of each other's laughter, who could tell by a single look if something was wrong with the bird. The C-130. Hercules was our home, our mule, our stubborn old friend. She was patched and battered, her paint faded by sun and salt, but she never let us down. Not until that day. Not until the day we became the forgotten flight. Our orders were simple. Haul spare parts and mail to a base so far out it barely had a name. No VIPs, no secret cargo. Just the kind of run that made you wish for a little excitement, a little break from the monotony. But boredom is a liar. Boredom is the mask that fate wears before it changes everything. Captain Harris was in command. A man whose voice could cut through any storm, whose mustache was the stuff of legend. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Benny Barnes, was fresh out of flight school, eager and nervous, always double-checking the checklists. Our navigator, Major Singh, was a quiet man with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, the kind who could find his way home by the stars alone. Chief Master Sergeant O'Malley, our crew chief, was built like a barn and twice as stubborn. The 2 loadmasters, Rodriguez and Kim, were the heart of the crew, always joking, always working, always watching each other's backs. And then there was me, the flight engineer, the one who kept the bird alive when she wanted to quit, the one who listened to the engines and the wind and the silence in between. We took off just after sunrise, the sky a bruised purple, the world below still dreaming. The Hercules rumbled down the runway, heavy with cargo, and lifted into the sky like she'd done 1,000 times before. The first hours passed in routine. Checklists, chatter, bad coffee, the endless blue of the Pacific stretching out below us. The radio hissed and crackled, the compass pointed true, and the engines sang their old familiar song. But somewhere past the halfway mark, the world changed. It started with the sky, the way it darkened without warning, clouds piling up like bruises on the horizon. The compass began to twitch, just a little at first, then more, until it spun in slow, lazy circles. The radio stuttered, voices fading in and out, words lost in static. I checked the gauges, checked them again, but nothing made sense. The fuel dropped faster than it should have, the numbers slipping away like water through my fingers. Captain Harris kept his voice calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the yoke. "Singh, give me a fix," he said, but Singh just shook his head, eyes glued to the map, sweat beading on his brow. "We're off course," he whispered. "I don't know where we are." The ocean below turned from blue to black, the clouds pressing down until it felt like we were flying through a tunnel. The engines coughed, the bird shuddered, and for the first time, I felt fur slip into the cockpit, cold and sharp. We were alone, lost, and running out of time. Then, through the murk, a strip of land appeared. It wasn't on any map, wasn't supposed to be there, but it was real enough. A jagged line of green and black against the endless sea. Captain Harris didn't hesitate. "We're putting her down," he said, and the crew snapped into action. Every man moving as if we'd practiced this 100 times. The approach was rough, The wind howled, the altimeter spun, and the ground rushed up to meet us. I called out airspeed, distance, anything to keep the panic at bay. The wheels hit dirt, bounced, skidded, and then we were down. The Hercules groaning as she came to a stop on a strip of land that shouldn't have existed. For a moment, there was silence. No one spoke. No one moved. We just sat there, listening to the engines wind down, to the sound of our own breathing, to the ocean hissing somewhere beyond the trees. O'Malley was the first to break the spell. "Well, boys," he said, his voice rough, "welcome to nowhere." We ran the shutdown checklist, checked the cargo, and checked each other. No injuries, no damage we couldn't fix. But the radio was dead, the compass still spinning, and the fuel tanks nearly dry. We were stranded. Rodriguez tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe we'll find a tiki bar," he joked, but no one laughed. The island was too quiet, too still. No birds, no insects, just the wind and the distant crash of waves. We gathered our gear, locked down the bird, and stepped out into the unknown. The air was thick and heavy, the ground soft beneath our boots, the jungle pressed in on all sides, green and dark and silent. It felt like stepping into another world, a world that didn't want us there. As we moved away from the plane, I looked back at the Hercules, her wings gleaming in the strange, slanting light. She looked small, vulnerable, out of place. I felt a pang of guilt, as if we'd betrayed her by bringing her here. We didn't know it then, but we'd crossed a line. We'd left the world we knew behind, and nothing would ever be the same. The first thing we noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses against your ears, makes your skin crawl, and leaves you waiting for a sound that never comes. The jungle was thick, the trees twisted and old, their roots tangled like the fingers of something long dead. Every step felt like trespass. Every breath tasted of damp earth and secrets. We stuck close together, moving in a slow, careful line. O'Malley led, machete in hand, hacking a path through the undergrowth. Rodriguez and Kim carried the emergency radio and a flare gun, just in case. Captain Harris kept glancing at the sky, as if he expected it to open up and swallow us whole. I kept my eyes on the ground, watching for anything that didn't belong, tracks, bones, the glint of metal, anything. We didn't talk much. When we did, our voices sounded small, swallowed by the green. "Have you ever seen trees like this?" Barnes whispered. "Not outside a nightmare," Kim replied, forcing a grin, but no one laughed. After half an hour, we reached a clearing. In the center stood a rusted metal structure, half buried in vines. It looked like the skeleton of a watchtower, the kind you'd see in old war movies. O'Malley circled it, boots crunching on gravel. "Japanese," he said, running a hand over faded kanji painted on the side. "World War II, maybe." Singh knelt by a pile of debris, sifting through the dirt. He found a canteen, a rusted helmet, a handful of spent cartridges. "This place saw fighting," he murmured. "A long time ago." We spread out, searching for anything useful: water, food, a clue to where we were. I found a battered sign, the paint almost gone. I could just make out a single word: forbidden. A chill ran down my spine. I called the others over, showed them the sign. O'Malley frowned. "Maybe we should head back to the bird," he said. "This place gives me the creeps." But Captain Harris shook his head. "We need to find water, and a way to call for help. We can't just sit and wait." We pressed on, deeper into the jungle. The air grew heavier, the light dimmer. The silence followed us, thick and unbroken, Every so often, I thought I saw movement in the trees, a shadow, a flicker of white. But when I looked, there was nothing. After another hour, we found a stream. The water was clear, cold, running over smooth stones. We filled our canteens, splashed our faces, tried to shake off the fear that clung to us like sweat. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. That's when we heard it. A voice, faint and distant, calling from somewhere upstream. We froze. Every muscle tensed. The voice came again, closer this time. It was a man, speaking English. His words slurred and desperate. "Help. Please. Someone." Without thinking, we ran toward the sound crashing through the undergrowth. The voice grew louder, more frantic. "Over here. Please." We burst into another clearing and stopped dead. There, slumped against a tree, was a man in a tattered flight suit. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild. He looked up as we approached, his lips trembling. "Who are you?" Captain Harris demanded, keeping his distance. The man tried to stand, but his legs buckled. I'm Lieutenant David Miller, U.S. Navy. My plane went down years ago. I've been stuck here so long." O'Malley knelt beside him, checked his pulse, and offered him water. Miller drank greedily, then coughed, tears streaming down his face. "You're real," he whispered. "I thought I was the last one." We exchanged uneasy glances. "How long have you been here?" Singh asked gently. Miller shook his head. "I don't know. Time doesn't work right here. The sun rises, but it never sets. Or maybe it sets, but it never rises." I stopped counting the days. Kim looked at me, eyes wide. "This is impossible," he mouthed. We helped Miller to his feet, supporting him as we made our way back to the Hercules. He kept looking over his shoulder, flinching at every sound. "There are others," he whispered. "I hear them at night. Voices in the trees. Sometimes I see lights, but when I go toward them, they disappear." Back at the plane, we tried the radio again. Nothing but static. The compass spun. The gauges flickered. The world felt wrong, like we'd stepped out of time. That night, we built a fire near the wing, the flames casting long shadows on the sand. Miller sat close, shivering despite the heat. He told us about his crash, about wandering the island, about the things he'd seen. Ghostly figures in old uniforms, strange lights in the jungle, the feeling of being watched. "I tried to leave once," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I walked the shoreline for hours, but I always ended up back here. Like the island wouldn't let me go. No one spoke for a long time. The fire crackled. The wind sighed through the trees. I looked at my watch. The hands hadn't moved in hours. As the night deepened, the silence grew heavier. I thought about home, about the people who would be waiting, wondering, hoping. I wondered if we'd ever see them again. Somewhere in the darkness, a voice called out. Not Miller's, not any of ours. Just a voice, drifting on the wind, lost and lonely. We huddled closer to the fire. 7 men and 1 impossible survivor, stranded on an island that shouldn't exist, haunted by the past and by the fear that we might never leave. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by dreams that felt too real. I saw faces in the firelight, faces I didn't know, faces that flickered and vanished when I tried to focus. I heard footsteps in the sand, whispers in a language I couldn't understand. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the island pressing in, as if it was watching, waiting. When dawn finally came, it was a pale, sickly light that barely touched the ground. The jungle looked different in the morning, less menacing, but no less strange. Dew clung to the Hercules' wings, and the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and something metallic. Miller was already awake, staring out at the trees, his hands trembling. We gathered around the fire, sharing what little food we had left. O'Malley tried the radio again, but it was still dead. Captain Harris called a meeting, his voice steady, but his eyes tired. "We need a plan," he said. "We can't just sit here and hope for rescue. We need to find a way off this island, or at least a way to let someone know where we are." Singh spread out the maps, but none of them matched what we'd seen. The island wasn't on any chart, not even as a speck. "It's like we slipped off the edge of the world," he muttered. Rodriguez suggested building a signal fire on the beach, something big enough to be seen from the air. Kim wanted to explore further inland, to see if there were any signs of other survivors, or maybe a way to higher ground. Miller just shook his head. "Be careful," he warned. "The island, it changes. Paths don't stay the same. Sometimes you walk in circles and end up right back where you started." Despite his warning, we split into two groups. Harris, O'Malley, and I would stay with the plane, try to get the radio working, and start building the signal fire. Singh, Rodriguez, Kim, and Miller would head inland, following the stream to see where it led. As the others disappeared into the jungle, I felt a knot of worry tighten in my chest. I busied myself with the radio, checking wires, swapping fuses, doing everything I could think of. O'Malley scavenged for dry wood, while Harris climbed onto the wing, scanning the horizon for any sign of a ship or plane. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, but the light never seemed to grow any stronger. The jungle remained silent. The only sounds were our own movements and the distant crash of waves. I kept glancing at my watch, but the hands were stuck at 7:14, no matter how many times I tapped the glass. By midday, the signal fire was ready, a towering pile of driftwood and palm fronds, doused with what little fuel we could spare. Harris lit it with a flare, and thick black smoke curled into the sky. We watched, hoping, praying that someone, somewhere, would see it, but the sky remained empty. As the afternoon wore on, I grew restless. I walked the perimeter of the clearing, checking the plane, checking the gear, checking the horizon. I found myself drawn to the edge of the jungle, peering into the shadows, listening for any sign of the others. That's when I heard it, a faint, distant cry. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it again, sharper this time. "Help! Over here!" I ran toward the sound, heart pounding. The jungle closed around me, the light fading with every step. Branches clawed at my arms, roots tangled my feet. I stumbled into a small clearing and stopped. Kim was there, alone, his face pale and streaked with dirt. He was breathing hard, eyes wide with fear. "They're gone," he gasped. "I lost them." 1 minute we were together, the next. I turned around and they were just gone. I tried to calm him, but he shook his head. "It's this place. It's like it's alive." I kept seeing things, shadows, shapes, moving in the trees. I heard voices, but when I called out, no one answered. We made our way back to the plane, Kim glancing over his shoulders every few steps. When we arrived, O'Malley and Harris were waiting, their faces grim. "No sign of the others?" Harris asked. I shook my head. We waited as the sun dipped lower, the shadows growing long and strange. The signal fire burned down to embers, the smoke drifting away on the wind. Still no sign of Singh, Rodriguez, or Miller. As night fell, the fear returned, sharper than before. We sat around the dying fire, listening to the jungle, listening to the silence. Every so often, we heard footsteps in the darkness, or the snap of a branch, or a voice calling from far away. Kim wouldn't stop shaking. "I saw something out there," he whispered. "It looked like Rodriguez, but it wasn't him." His eyes were wrong. He smiled at me, but it wasn't his smile. No one knew what to say. We just sat there, 4 men stranded on an island that didn't exist, haunted by the fear that we were being watched, hunted, toyed with. That night I dreamed of home. I saw my wife's face, my daughter's laughter, the warmth of a world that made sense. But even in my dreams, I could feel the island pressing in and could hear the whispers in the dark. When I woke, the fire was out and the jungle was silent once more. Morning came slow and grey, the kind of light that makes everything look washed out and unreal. I sat up, my back aching from the hard ground, and looked around at the others. Harris was already awake, staring at the dead fire. O'Malley was pacing, muttering to himself. Kim sat with his knees pulled to his chest, eyes fixed on the jungle, as if daring it to move. No one spoke for a long time. The silence between us was heavy, filled with questions none of us wanted to ask. Where was Singh, Rodriguez, and Miller? Had they gotten lost, or had the island swallowed them whole? Was there something out there? Something watching, waiting for us to make a mistake? We forced ourselves to eat, chewing on dry rations that tasted like cardboard. I tried the radio again, but it was still nothing but static. The compass spun lazily, as if mocking us. I checked my watch, still stuck at 7:14. Time had no meaning here. Harris finally broke the silence. "We can't just sit here. We have to look for them." His voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "We'll stick together this time. No one goes off alone." We armed ourselves with what we had: a flare gun, machete, and a single pistol with 6 rounds. It wasn't much, but it made us feel a little less helpless. We set off into the jungle, moving slowly, calling out the names of our missing friends. The jungle felt different now. The air was thicker, the shadows deeper. Every step felt like walking into a dream you couldn't wake from. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches reaching out like fingers. The ground was soft and spongy, and every so often, I thought I saw footprints, bare, narrow, too small to be any of ours. We followed the stream, hoping it would lead us to the others. The water was cold and clear, but it made strange patterns as it flowed over the rocks, swirling in circles that never seemed to end. Kim stopped suddenly, pointing to a patch of mud. There, pressed into the earth, was a single boot print. Next to it, a smaller, barefoot print. O'Malley knelt down, tracing the outline with his finger. "That's Rodriguez's boot," he said quietly. "But who's the other one?" We pressed on, the jungle growing darker with every step. The air was filled with the scent of wet earth and something else, something sweet and rotten. I felt a headache building behind my eyes, a pressure that made it hard to think. We found the first sign of them near a fallen tree, a scrap of fabric, torn and muddy, caught on a branch. It was part of Singh's uniform. Kim picked it up, his hands shaking. "They were here," he whispered. "Not long ago." We called out, our voices echoing through the trees. For a moment, I thought I heard an answer, a faint cry, far away. We ran toward the sound, crashing through the undergrowth, branches whipping at our faces. We burst into a small clearing and stopped. In the center stood a stone marker, old and weathered, covered in moss. Carved into the surface were strange symbols, half erased by time. At the base of the marker lay a pile of bones, small, white, picked clean. Kim backed away, his face pale. "We need to go," he said, "now." But Harris stepped forward, studying the marker. "This is a grave," he said softly. "A warning, maybe." O'Malley shook his head. "I don't like this. We should go back." But before we could move, we heard footsteps behind us. We spun around, weapons raised. Out of the shadow stepped Rodriguez, his uniform torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood. He looked at us, his eyes wide and wild. "You have to leave," he gasped. "It's not safe. The island, it's alive. It doesn't want us here." We rushed to him, helping him sit. He was shaking, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Where's Singh? Where's Miller?" Harris asked. Rodriguez shook his head. "Gone. I don't know how. 1 minute they were there, the next, they just vanished." I heard voices, saw lights. I tried to follow, but the paths kept changing. I ended up here. We tried to calm him, but he just kept repeating the same words. "It's alive. It's watching. It won't let us go." We decided to head back to the plane, moving as quickly as we could. The jungle seemed to close in around us, the light fading even though it was still morning. Every sound made us jump. Every shadow looked like a threat. When we finally broke through the trees and saw the Hercules, I felt a wave of relief. The plane looked battered and out of place, but it was ours. It was real. We got Rodriguez settled, gave him water, and tried to make him comfortable. He wouldn't stop shaking. "Don't go back in there," he whispered. "Don't follow the voices." That night we sat around the fire, the four of us huddled close. The jungle was silent, but every so often we heard footsteps in the darkness, or the sound of someone crying far away. I looked at the others, saw the fear in their eyes, the exhaustion in their faces. We were running out of hope, running out of time. As I lay down to sleep, I wondered if we'd ever leave this place, or if we'd become just another story, another set of bones at the base of a forgotten marker. Sleep was a stranger that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stone marker, the pile of bones, and Rodriguez's haunted face. The jungle pressed in on all sides, the darkness thick and suffocating. I lay awake, listening to the others breathe, listening for footsteps that might not be real. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows on the side of the Hercules. I found myself counting the seconds between each crackle, desperate for anything that felt normal. Sometime after midnight, I heard a sound, a soft, shuffling step just beyond the firelight. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw Kim already awake, his eyes wide and fearful. O'Malley gripped the flare gun, knuckles white. Harris was staring into the dark, his jaw clenched. The sound came again, closer this time. A voice, low and broken, called out from the trees, "Help, please." It was Singh's voice, or at least it sounded like him. We froze, every muscle tensed. Harris whispered, "Don't move, don't answer." But Kim was already on his feet, calling out, "Singh, over here." The voice came again, more urgent, "Please, I'm hurt." O'Malley grabbed Kim's arm, pulling him back. "That's not him," he hissed. "Stay by the fire." The voice faded, replaced by a long, mournful wail that sent chills down my spine. The jungle fell silent again. The only sound was our own ragged breathing. We sat there until dawn, too afraid to sleep, too afraid to move. When the first light crept over the horizon, we found footprints in the sand, bare, narrow, circling our camp. They led back into the jungle, disappearing among the roots and shadows. Rodriguez was worse in the morning. He barely spoke, staring at nothing, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold his canteen. Harris tried to talk to him, but he just kept muttering, "It's alive. It's watching." We took stock of our supplies. Food was running low, water even lower. The radio was still dead, the compass still spinning. The signal fire had burned out, leaving only a pile of ash. The sky was a dull, unchanging gray, the sun a pale smudge behind the clouds. Harris gathered us together. "We can't stay here," he said. "If we do, we'll die. We have to try something, anything. We'll take the emergency raft, follow the shoreline, see if we can find another way off this island. Maybe there's a village, a fishing boat, something." O'Malley shook his head. "And if the island just brings us back here? Like it did to Miller?" Harris looked at each of us in turn. "We can't give up, not yet." We packed what little we had, water, a few rations, the flare gun, a knife. Rodriguez was too weak to walk, so we made a stretcher from a cargo net and 2 poles. The 4 of us lifted him, his weight barely more than the gear we carried. We set off along the beach, the sand soft beneath our boots, the ocean a constant restless presence at our side. The jungle loomed to our left, dark and impenetrable. Every so often, I thought I saw movement among the trees, a flash of white, a shadow slipping between the trunks. We walked for hours, the shoreline curving endlessly ahead. The island seemed to stretch on forever, the landscape repeating itself in subtle, unsettling ways. A fallen tree here, a cluster of rocks there, each one familiar, as if we'd passed it before. Kim was the first to say it. "We're walking in circles," he whispered. "I know I've seen that log before." Harris stopped, looking back the way we'd come. The footprints in the sand were gone, washed away by the tide. The jungle was silent, the air heavy with the scent of salt and decay. We pressed on, desperate, refusing to believe what we already knew. The island wouldn't let us go. By midday, Rodriguez was delirious, mumbling to himself, his eyes rolling back in his head. We stopped to rest, lowering him gently to the sand. O'Malley checked his pulse, shook his head. "He needs water. Real water. Not this brackish stuff." I stared out at the ocean, the endless blue, and felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. I thought of home, of the people who would never know what happened to us. I wondered if we'd already become ghosts, lost to the world, forgotten by everyone but each other. As we sat there, the sky darkened suddenly, clouds rolling in from the horizon. The wind picked up, whipping the sand into our faces. The ocean grew rough, waves crashing against the shore. A storm was coming. Harris made the call. Back to the plane. Now, we struggled back the way we'd come. The wind at our backs, the rain starting to fall in cold, stinging sheets. The jungle seemed to close in, the path twisting and turning, never quite the same as before. When we finally stumbled into the clearing, soaked and exhausted, the Hercules was still there, battered but unbroken. We dragged Rodriguez under the wing, huddled together as the storm raged around us. That night, as the rain hammered the metal skin of the plane, I lay awake, listening to the wind, listening to the voices that rose and fell with the storm. I wondered if we'd ever leave this place, or if we'd become just another story. Another set of bones lost to the island's hunger. The storm lasted all night, a relentless assault of wind and rain that battered the Hercules and soaked us to the bone. We huddled beneath the wing, shivering, our clothes clinging to our skin. The fire was long gone, drowned by the downpour. Every so often, lightning would split the sky, illuminating the jungle in stark, unnatural flashes. In those moments, I thought I saw figures moving between the trees, shadows that vanished as soon as the darkness returned. When morning finally came, it brought no relief. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy and still, thick with the scent of wet earth and something sour. The jungle steamed, the leaves dripping, the ground a muddy mess. Rodriguez was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. O'Malley did what he could, but we all knew it wasn't enough. We took stock of our situation. The food was almost gone. The water was down to a single canteen. The radio was still dead, the compass still spinning. The storm had scattered our gear, and the signal fire was nothing but a soggy pile of ash. The world felt smaller, the island pressing in on all sides. Harris called us together. His voice was hoarse, but his eyes were clear. "We have to try the radio again. Maybe the storm cleared the interference. Maybe someone's listening." I climbed into the cockpit, my hands shaking. I checked the wires, tapped the dials, and tried every trick I knew. For a moment, I thought I heard something. A faint, distant voice, lost in the static. I called out, gave our position, and begged for help. But the voice faded, swallowed by the noise. I slammed my fist against the panel, fighting the urge to scream. Kim put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll get out of this," he said, but his voice was thin, unconvincing. We spent the day tending to Rodriguez, rationing the last of the water, searching the jungle for anything useful. O'Malley found a patch of wild fruit, but it was bitter and strange, and none of us dared eat it. The jungle was too quiet, the silence broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird or the rustle of something moving just out of sight. As the sun began to set, Harris made a decision. "We'll take turns watching tonight. No one goes anywhere alone. If you hear anything, you wake the others." We nodded, too tired to argue. I took the first watch, sitting beneath the wing, staring out at the jungle. The shadows grew long, the light fading to a dull, bruised purple. I listened to the sounds of the others sleeping, to the slow, labored breathing of Rodriguez, to the distant crash of waves. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps, soft, careful, moving through the mud. I tensed, gripping the flare gun, my heart pounding. The footsteps stopped just beyond the edge of the firelight. I held my breath, waiting. A voice called out, low and familiar. "It's me. Sing." I almost answered, almost called out his name. But something stopped me. A memory of the night before, of the voice that wasn't Singh's, of the footprints in the sand. I stayed silent, watching. The figure stepped into the light. It looked like Singh, same uniform, same walk, same tired eyes. But there was something wrong, something off in the way he moved, the way he smiled. His eyes were too bright, his smile too wide. He knelt beside the fire, staring into the embers. "You have to leave," he whispered. "The island won't let you go. But you have to try." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just watched as he stood, turned, and walked back into the jungle, his footsteps leaving no trace in the mud. When my watch ended, I woke O'Malley, told him what I'd seen. He listened, his face pale. "You did the right thing," he said. "Whatever that was, it wasn't Singh." The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence. Every so often, I heard voices, sometimes calling my name, sometimes whispering in a language I didn't know. I kept my eyes on the fire, my hand on the flare gun, and waited for dawn. When morning came, Rodriguez was gone. We searched the camp, called his name, and scoured the jungle. There were no footprints, no sign of struggle, nothing but the impression of his body in the mud where he'd lain. It was as if he'd simply vanished. Kim broke down, sobbing into his hands. O'Malley cursed, kicking at the mud. Harris just stood there, staring at the empty space, his face blank. We were four now, 4 men, stranded on an island that didn't exist, haunted by the ghosts of those we'd lost. That day we didn't speak much. We sat beneath the wing, watching the sky, listening to the jungle. Every so often, I thought I saw movement among the trees. A flash of white, a shadow slipping between the trunks. I wondered if it was Rodriguez or Singh or Miller, or just the island playing tricks on my mind. As night fell, the fear returned, sharper than ever. I lay awake listening to the wind, listening to the voices that rose and fell with the darkness. I wondered if we'd ever leave this place, or if we'd become just another story, another set of bones lost to the island's hunger. The next morning, the world felt even smaller. The sky was a flat, endless gray, the air heavy, with the promise of more rain. We moved like ghosts, each of us lost in our own thoughts, our own fears. The Hercules loomed behind us, battered and silent, a monument to everything we'd lost. Harris called us together, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We can't stay here," he said. "If we do, we'll die. We have to try the jungle again. Maybe there's something we missed. A way out, a clue, anything." O'Malley shook his head, his eyes hollow. "We've tried. The island just brings us back. It's like it's alive." Kim stared at the ground, his hands trembling. "I keep seeing them. Rodriguez, Singh, Miller. Sometimes I hear them calling my name. Sometimes I see them standing at the edge of the trees, just watching." I didn't know what to say. I felt the same way. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, pale, silent, accusing. I wondered if we were already dead, if the island had claimed us and we just hadn't realized it yet. But Harris wouldn't give up. "We have to try," he said again. And there was something in his voice, a stubborn hope, a refusal to surrender. "We'll stick together. No one goes off alone. We keep moving until we find something." We packed what little we had left, 1 canteen of water, a few scraps of food, the flare gun, the pistol. We left the Hercules behind, its battered wings gleaming dully in the grey light. I looked back one last time, feeling a pang of guilt, as if we were abandoning an old friend. The jungle swallowed us quickly. The path twisted and turned, the trees pressing in on all sides. The air was thick and humid, the ground soft and treacherous. Every step felt like walking through a dream, a nightmare you couldn't wake from. We moved in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Every so often, I thought I heard footsteps behind us, or saw a flash of movement in the corner of my eye. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the path ahead, but the fear was always there. Just beneath the surface, after what felt like hours, we stumbled into a clearing. In the center stood a stone archway, old and crumbling, covered in moss and vines. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, half erased by time. The air felt colder here, the silence deeper. Harris stepped forward, studying the archway. "This wasn't here before," he said quietly. O'Malley frowned. "Are we sure we're not just walking in circles?" Kim shook his head. "No, I'd remember this." We approached the archway cautiously, every sense on edge. As we drew closer, I felt a strange pressure in my chest, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. The symbols on the stone seemed to shift and change, twisting into shapes I almost recognized. Harris reached out, running his fingers over the carvings. "It feels warm," he murmured, "like it's alive." Suddenly a voice echoed through the clearing. A voice I knew, a voice I'd heard 1,000 times. "Help me?" It was Rodriguez, or at least it sounded like him. We spun around, searching for the source. The jungle was empty, the shadows deep and impenetrable. The voice came again, closer this time. "Please, don't leave me." Kim took a step toward the trees, but O'Malley grabbed his arm. "Don't," he said, his voice shaking. "It's not him. It's the island." The air grew colder, the pressure in my chest building until I could barely breathe. I felt dizzy, lightheaded, as if the ground was shifting beneath my feet. The symbols on the archway seemed to glow, pulsing with a faint, sickly light. Harris turned to us, his face pale. "We have to go through," he said. "It's the only way." O'Malley hesitated, but Kim nodded, his eyes wide with fear. "Anything's better than staying here." We stepped through the archway, one by one. As I passed beneath the stone, I felt a jolt, a surge of energy that left me gasping. The world spun, the light flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw the faces of everyone we'd lost. Rodriguez, Singh, Miller, watching us from the shadows. Then the world snapped back into focus. We were standing in a new clearing. The jungle different, the air lighter. The sky above was a deep, endless blue, the sun shining bright and warm. For the first time in days, I felt hope, but the feeling didn't last. The jungle was still there, still watching, still waiting. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of the light, I heard a voice, soft, familiar, and full of sorrow. "Don't forget us." We pressed on, driven by desperation, by the need to survive, by the hope that somewhere, somehow, we'd find a way home. We moved forward, blinking in the sudden sunlight, half blinded by hope and fear. The air was different here, crisp, almost sweet, carrying the scent of flowers and something faintly familiar, like the memory of home. For a moment, we just stood there, breathing, letting the warmth soak into our skin. It felt like waking from a nightmare, but none of us dared to believe it was over. Harris was the first to speak, his voice trembling. "We keep moving. Don't stop. Don't look back." He sounded like a man afraid that if he paused, the world would snap shut around us again. We walked in silence, the jungle opening up around us, the path clear and straight for the first time since we'd landed. The trees were taller here, the leaves brighter, the shadows less menacing. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. Even Kim, who had barely spoken for days, managed a weak smile. But the relief was fragile. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, a flash of white, a shadow slipping between the trees. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the path ahead, but the fear was always there, just beneath the surface. We walked for what felt like hours, the sun climbing higher, the air growing warmer. My throat was dry, my legs aching, but I didn't dare stop. None of us did. We were driven by the memory of what we left behind, the voices, the shadows, the hunger of the island. At last, we broke through the trees and found ourselves standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The water stretched out before us, endless and blue, the waves crashing against the rocks far below. For the first time since we'd landed, I felt a surge of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, we'd found a way out. Harris scanned the horizon, shielding his eyes from the sun. "There," he said, pointing. "In the distance, a ship, a real ship, not a mirage or a trick of the light. A US Navy destroyer, its grey hull gleaming in the sunlight." We shouted, waving our arms, firing the last flare into the sky. The red streak arced high, bursting against the blue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the ship turned, heading toward us. Relief crashed over me, so intense it left me shaking. Kim dropped to his knees, sobbing with joy. O'Malley just stared, his face wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. Harris gripped my shoulder, his hand trembling. We watched as the ship drew closer, a small boat lowering into the water, men in uniforms waving and calling out. We scrambled down the cliff, slipping and sliding on the rocks, desperate to reach them before the island could change its mind. The sailors pulled us aboard, wrapping us in blankets, pressing water and food into our hands. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. I just sat there, shaking, tears streaming down my face. On the deck of the destroyer, the world felt solid and real. The sky was blue, the sun was warm, the air was filled with the sound of voices and laughter. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I believed we were safe. But even as we sailed away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, that the island was still out there, waiting. I looked back, searching the horizon, but there was nothing, just endless blue. The island gone, as if it had never existed. They debriefed us for hours, asking the same questions over and over. Where had we landed? How had we survived? What happened to the others? We told them what we could, but the story sounded impossible, even to us. They found the Hercules weeks later, abandoned on a strip of land that didn't appear on any map. The plane was empty, the cargo untouched, the radio dead. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing but the memory of what we'd endured. We were sent home, hailed as survivors, but the world had changed. I found myself waking in the night, heart pounding, certain I could hear voices calling my name. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow in the corner of my eye, or feel a cold hand on my shoulder. I wondered if we'd ever really left the island, or if a part of us was still there, lost in the jungle, waiting to be found. Harris retired, moved to the mountains, rarely spoke of what happened. O'Malley stayed in the service, but he was never the same, quieter, more distant, haunted by memories he couldn't escape. Kim left the Air Force, started a family, and tried to build a new life. I kept flying, unable to trust the ground, always searching the horizon for something I couldn't name. We were the forgotten flight, 7 men, one impossible landing. We survived, but we left something behind. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows grow long, I wonder if the island is still out there, waiting for the next lost crew, the next desperate hope. If you're hearing this, remember us. Remember the ones who didn't make it home. And if you ever find yourself flying over endless blue, and the compass starts to spin, and the radio goes quiet, don't look for the island. Don't answer the voices. Just keep flying and pray you never have to land.